Deep within each of us, there is a yearning to awaken our inner mystic. In this podcast, we explore topics related to metaphysics, including the law of attraction, spiritual awakening, consciousness, and ascension. We invite you to join us on a journey of awakening the inner mystic in order to unleash magic and miracles in your life. In this episode, we will be discussing the current energies on the planet and what you can do to stay anchored in balance and peace.
So, Irene, I have a question for you. What the hell is going on this planet right now? Because I want to know, and everybody else does too. So, do you have any insights?
Well, I can certainly, yes, I think we can all feel the energies right now, and they are certainly ramping up. And those of us who are sensitive to energy can definitely feel it. People are experiencing a variety of symptoms ranging from anxiety to exhaustion. And we can also see these energies playing out in the world through just really like a revolutionary attitudes. We're seeing this chaos and even madness and psychosis really showing up in people, showing up in the collective.
Yes, we can definitely see it. You can't help but notice it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just everything seems to be in your face right now, just with the pandemic and rioting and protests and political discord. Everything seems to be reaching a fever pitch at this moment in time. But I've also noticed individually, people that I know, and including myself, have been experiencing a lot of chaos and upheaval in my personal life. Just things that have been status quo for so long are all of a sudden just unraveling for not just me, but many people that I know.
Me too.
I
find the same thing. Just a lot of just eventful kinds of life circumstances that we're seeing right now.
And the hits keep on coming. It's like, what's next? And I think people are very frightened right now.
I agree.
What they're seeing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's why we really wanted to kind of delve into this, because if you take a look at the world, it's a very scary place. And if you judge the world by the way it appears right now, it's like, man, we are doomed. It's easy to fall into that doom and gloom mentality. So we really wanted to tap into inner guidance to get some upliftment through all of this. And so we're going to talk about that today.
So I wanted to talk a little bit today about how we get the inspiration for our podcast. We tap into higher realms. We tap into using our spirit guides and masters, ancestors, spirit animals. And also we tap into the Akashic Records. And Irene is an Akashic Records reader. And so I wanted to ask you a question of how were you first drawn to the Akashic Records?
Sure. Well, it happened a couple years ago. My friend and I do this weekly book club where we study different mystical texts, and she happened to suggest How to Read the Akashic Records by Linda Howe. Once we got into it, it was just basically magical. It was right away. We were able to get into the records using this pathway prayer is what Linda Howe calls it. So basically you say this prayer, you get into the Akashic Records, and boom, as soon as I got in, I started getting all kinds of visions.
And what are the Akashic Records exactly for our listeners who don't know?
Sure. The Akash, so the word Akash it basically means an etheric realm that contains an energetic blueprint for each soul. So think like it's like the DNA of the ether. And it's really kind of that blueprint. It's like kind of like an architect would have blueprints for his home that he would design. It's the same kind of thing. There's this blueprint that exists in this realm, and each soul has its own virtual library known as the Akashic Records. So the Akashic Records contain an imprint, or this blueprint, whatever you want to call it, of all your past, present, and future thoughts, words, and actions. So it's kind of like likened to a library for each person's soul journey. And basically, when you access the realm of the Akashic Records, you're really getting illumination or knowledge and wisdom about any topic or problem through a higher dimensional perspective. So you have these, I call it the spiritual A team. It's basically their masters, teachers, and loved ones who each soul has their own set of these.
So they're basically assigned to you and helping you along your journey.
Yes. Yeah. So these are also the spirits that can show up as your spirit guides in the world, but you can access them through the Akash. And basically, you get information about all kinds of things. So, for example, people might want to know, why am I always attracting the wrong partner? And you can get really good insights as to why this is happening. It could be a past life. It could be, some belief system that you had that you were programmed to have when you were younger, anything that is an obstacle in your life. And it really gives you tremendous wisdom and tools to be able to move forward. And it also provides healing. When you get this illumination, it's like a transmission that you receive. It's this energetic transmission, and it can really be miraculous in helping you to move energy, clear energy, and move forward in your life. So,
and that's what happens to me every time I have an Akashic reading with you. Mm-hmm. The energy just moves and clears with zero effort on my part. It just clears and moves. And it's like I think about our session and all the helpful advice that you gave me, but the thing about it is it's like the emotional charge is gone from whatever I was worried about.
Yeah.
Every time. It's miraculous.
It's magical.
Yeah.
So we've actually started using the Akashic Records to get insights into and higher wisdom to assist humanity in raising its vibration and consciousness. So we're using the Akashic Records in our podcast as one of our avenues for getting and accessing this higher wisdom. So I asked, based on these current energies that we're experiencing right now, I had to go into my records and ask them what the hell is going on in the world right now. When I asked that question, I basically got these visions, and I got this like music, this discordant music and energy that I kind of compared to like a death metal song that's turned all the way up in volume, and it's on repeat. Okay. So that's kind of what the vision and the sensory experience that I had when I was in the Akashic Records, that they were comparing the current energies to this death metal song or this death metal music. What they showed me is that this discordant energy is stirring up chaos and polarity on the planet. And we're seeing it play out in individuals through a lot of anger and rage. And we're also seeing it show up in the collective as more or less a revolution through. We're seeing extreme polarities within all realms of society, including politics, within racial divide, within religions. I mean, there's just all this back and forth going on. The good news is that there is a divine purpose for all of this chaotic and destructive energy. And that's where I see the higher perspective of why things are playing out. So the way that they described what's playing out right now is that the purpose of it is to make the old crumble to make way for the new. So we are seeing structures of society crumbling and come crashing down. The old paradigms of our reality and the institutions of this world are collapsing in front of us in order for this new energy to be birthed onto the planet. So this new energy, of course, is a higher vibrational energy. It's positive, it's peaceful, it's a unity consciousness. As far as what's happening, change doesn't happen by maintaining the status quo. They wanted me to know that. We couldn't go on in the world the way it was 2 or 3 years ago, where everything was just kind of brushed under the carpet. That is status quo. So we really make our biggest evolutionary leaps when the outdated systems and beliefs that we cling onto are destroyed. And unfortunately, that's how evolution works. The universe is orchestrating all of this destruction and crumbling. And we are headed to this tipping point. And the way they showed me this was they compared it to a roller coaster. So when we see a roller coaster, it's slowly moving up the incline and it's making its way slowly towards the top. And it's really that point we start to sense that anticipation and that nervousness and that rapid heartbeat. And, everything starts to kind of escalate. Another analogy is really if you think about the plot line of a movie or a play. So as the movie progresses, the plot starts to thicken and there's more and more conflict that just builds up and builds up and builds up. And then finally, it reaches the tipping point, which is really the crest of the wave. So think about when the roller coaster gets to the top, that's when everything just kind of releases. And then you get this potential energy that has built up. And then that potential energy then causes the descent. And basically what they explained was that potential energy, when we get to that tipping point, which we haven't reached it yet, but we're headed that way. So that potential energy will allow humanity to glide down with ease and flow down that roller coaster ride of life. But we haven't gotten to that tipping point yet, but that's where we're headed is what they explained. So good news, everybody. Good news.
But in the meantime, what can we do to survive the ascent?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes. And that's what this podcast is really about. It's just what techniques can we use? How can we stay centered? How can we stay in peace? And we're going to tap into Heather's wisdom. Heather has beautiful experience as a life coach and uses all kinds of these techniques with her clients to help them stay grounded and centered. So Heather, why don't you go over some of the techniques that you would recommend in how we can stay centered through all of this?
Okay, so when this pandemic first started, I ran across a video that came up on my YouTube feed, and it was a spiritual teacher. Mm-hmm. Now, I watched it in March, but he actually did the video back in December 2019. And what he said in it, and I quote, 2020 is going to be nuts. So if that's not the understatement of the year, I don't know, I don't know what it is. So 2020 is going to be nuts. And he said that you have to try to remain in the eye of the storm. No matter what you see, you'll see the storm raging all around you. But you have to find that peace within yourself, or the eye of the storm.
I love that. I love that idea that there's that calm within the center, right? And that's what it is. It's staying centered.
Yes, staying centered.
So this is where Heather's going to talk about some ways that we can stay in the eye of the storm and give us some practical guidance and strategies to be able to do that leaning on the wisdom of her life coaching skills.
Mm-hmm. And I took this advice to heart, and I have used all the tools that I know this year to get through it, to try to stay in the eye of the storm. And I'm not 100% there all the time. And when my cage gets rattled, which it has been frequently, I can find my way back quickly using these tools. Mm-hmm. And my number one favorite technique, well, first of all, call Irene and have her do an Akashic reading for me.
Okay, but not all you. I mean,
I know.
Y'all can get an Akashic record reading, but how does one also, how does the average person stay centered?
So, okay, my first technique, and it's a very simple one, comes from Eckhart Tolle. He's one of my favorite. Yes, he's one of my favorite teachers. And what you do is, when you're going through an emotional upset, you simply stop and you look around and you say, do I have a problem right now? Mm-hmm. And usually the answer is nope, because it's all in your mind.
Right.
So for example, so my mind is racing and I stop and ask myself, do I have a problem right now? I look around. No, I'm just at the park on a beautiful sunny day with my kids.
Mm-hmm. It's just you're spinning in your mind.
It's just I'm spinning in my mind. Yep. Here I am at the park with this blue sky and a gentle breeze with the apocalypse playing out in my mind. And in other words, I'm tuned into the collective like death metal song at that moment.
Right.
Because it's really easy to get sucked in there. The energy is everywhere.
Right.
But this simple question, do I have a problem right now, will snap you out of it and into the present moment.
Yep.
And 9 times out of 10, the answer to the question is nope.
Right.
You do not have a problem right now.
Yeah. So basically what you're saying is you got to look at what's right in front of you, right?
Exactly.
And a lot of times I do believe, and we've talked about this before, where we create our own suffering by spinning and chasing our own tails when really there's no problem directly in front of us. It's just what our minds are generating. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Another technique is do not watch the news.
That's an easy one. I mean, that's a pretty, if someone could just make that basic change in their lives, I think that would be, I know I stopped watching the news probably into February, after listening to the same old broken record every day about COVID. I just stopped watching it because it was just sucking me.
Well, it's
sucking
not
me
good
in.
for your mental health.
Right.
If you must check in to the news, try to limit it.
Yeah.
Try to limit it. Because I find, go ahead.
Sorry. I go into, what I do is go into Google News or CNN News or whatever news station, you're into. There's online versions, and there's something less dramatic about reading it, I think, than watching these stories. I think the stories are designed to elicit an emotion, right?
And that emotion is fear.
Absolutely, right? So I think if you read the stories, not quite as intense.
Yeah, and I find that if I don't watch the news, I don't get sucked down that rabbit hole of negativity, and I feel so much better because there are just so many things that you can't control.
That's right. You can't.
And 99% of the news is negative. It's all fear-based. It's toxic. Like Irene said, it's meant to elicit a certain response. And you can apply the same principle to toxic people. Try to limit your exposure.
Yes. Yeah. Toxic people. Yes.
And then what you can do is surround yourself with uplifting people and positive media.
Yes.
When the pandemic started, Irene and we were members of a book club, and we still are. We started studying a spiritual text called the Gene Keys, and it is deep spiritual work where you face your shadows to unleash your gifts. So here we are meeting every week when all hell breaks loose. And
at the beginning, weren't you really back? Weren't you in that negative?
Oh, yeah.
I can remember you watched the news every day back then when we started this, right?
I had taken a really long hiatus from watching the news. And then when all this stuff started happening, I was sucked right back in, and I was constantly checking and constantly, this is morbid, but constantly looking at the death count in different states. It was really bad. And so here I was in full-blown hair on fire panic mode. But these wonderful ladies in my book group pulled me off the edge of the cliff, and they were saying things like, let's look for the gifts and the beauty during this time. And they told stories about their communities pulling together and helping each other out. So I stopped watching the news, and I pulled myself together and began to look for the silver lining in this strange, crazy time. I began to meditate my ass off. I found myself shifting very quickly into a new and centered me. So shout out to our Magical Book Club members, Catherine, Gwen, and Tara.
Shout out to our friends.
Yay!
And you are so right about, you talked about surrounding yourself with uplifting people. What I found early on during this lockdown where, we had to be at home and there's all this like crazy fear-based energy going around with this virus is that I started to have this aversion towards like negative people. I found myself not wanting to talk to some friends that I had in the past that tended to focus on more negative things. And, God bless us all. We're all in this journey and we're all dealing with it differently. But I became very sensitive to those negative energies, and I found myself only wanted to be surrounded by these positive women. And I feel so blessed that I am surrounded by so many uplifting, spiritual, positive women in my life, because honestly, that is the one constant thing that has kept me just going on this path. And like you said, that has kept me centered in this, in this process. It's just very uplifting. So I just wanted to mention that.
And technique number 4, there is a great phrase that I heard recently, which is sacred subversion.
Yeah.
It comes from an oracle deck that Irene has called Earth Warriors.
Yep. It's the Word Earth Warrior Oracle by Alana Fairchild, and I love it. And so it's interesting because we basically decided to do a group reading for ourselves, or like a reading for both of us. And the card we got was this Nana Buluku is her name, and she says that she rests to create. And it can all be summed up by this phrase in the description part of the oracle deck, where it describes what Nana Buluku's message is. And basically, she proposes that we use something called sacred subversion of established disorder that would otherwise have you chasing your tail, running yourself ragged, and wearing yourself out in the belief that somehow this would help you get to where you want to be.
I love that. That's beautiful. That phrase just really struck me when I heard it. And the sacred subversions come into play because stopping to rest goes against the belief systems of American society, where the message is go full speed all the time. You can rest when you die. And so people end up caffeine fueled, fried adrenals, terrible night's sleep, with the cycle starting again the next day.
Yeah. And one of the things too that I wanted to mention is that this energy we're in right now, this death metal music, is exhausting. So it's especially, now I know we've talked about it before and we preach about resting and how important it is, but it's more important than ever to listen to your body, because I've heard a lot of people talking about how exhausted they feel, even though there's not anything, they're not any more busier than they've normally been, but just understand this is more of an energetic influence than anything else. So it's very important to rest and rejuvenate in order to be able to move forward and to stay centered.
And plus, these days, you really want a strong immune system. And if your body is worn down, your immune system is too.
Yeah, good
and
point.
And when you give your body time to rest, even just 10 minutes, it restores your hormones. It gives you fuel for the rest of the day. What I do is, if I'm really busy, I'll usually take about 10 minutes. I have some short hypnosis recordings that I'll listen to. Just shut my eyes, listen to the recording for about 10 minutes. Sometimes I'll even fall asleep for a few minutes. And then afterwards, I just feel rested and rejuvenated. It's amazing. A 10-minute rest can give you so much energy. Or instead of doing a hypnosis recording, you could also just sit there and meditate. Just close your eyes, rest, try to clear your mind and focus on your breath and meditate, which is a good segue to technique number 5, is meditate. Meditation is the key to peace, and it's how you find your center and connect with your spirit and establish a relationship with your guides and the divine. I've explored many types of meditation. I like the Himalayan singing bowls, sound healing, chanting meditations, guided meditations, meditations for manifesting or changing thought patterns. So just explore and have fun with it. It's just a matter of setting aside those 10 minutes for yourself.
Exactly.
Do you have any favorite meditations that you like to do on a regular basis?
I find myself in this energy being less able to focus. So what I found lately is any type of guided meditation allows me to be more centered, and my attention will be able to sustain a little bit longer. Because if I just try to do a mantra or try to do a body scan, it's like then my mind just starts going off. And so I really have to resort to something a little bit more structured. But every person is different. Some people can just listen to music and meditate, or they could listen to Himalayan
singing bowls.
Yeah, the singing bowls. Yep. And so it just depends on the person. But for me, I like to keep it pretty structured. It keeps me more engaged. Yeah.
And also another thing that keeps you in the eye of the storm is having faith that the universe has your back.
Yeah. And you know what? This was one. So when I got that Akashic record reading that where they were explaining, related to this podcast today about what was going on with the energy, basically what they said is have faith to know that the universe is in control and the universe has your back.
Yes, yes. And I like to remind myself of this great Rumi quote, live as if everything is rigged in your favor.
Ooh, I love that.
And so it's a positive belief system that you can install to help you get through anything, no matter what is happening, to help you get through it with grace and ease rather than resistance and victimhood.
Right. Yeah. And really, I mean, when you look around you and you see, you're watching the news and you see all these people losing their minds, whether it's at Costco or, CVS. And it's easy to, kind of get into that gloom and doom mentality and to think that there is something underneath it all that is beautiful and that there's light behind it all. It's hard to stay in that belief when what's in front of you is not agreeing with this message that the universe has your back. But that's where the faith needs to come in. Faith of knowing that things are not as they appear right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So...
And also reminds me of the quote that it's always darkest before the dawn.
Yes.
And that is so true. And we've got so much darkness coming in right now, but on the other side, there's going to be so much light.
Right. After that tipping point.
Yep. Renaissance, it's going to be a rebirth.
Yep. Yeah. And it's interesting because it was in this energy of crumbling and destruction that this podcast series was birthed. Isn't that interesting? Because I think that, again, seeing the gift in it all, we were able to say, okay, now we have the gift of time. Normally, I do some work during the day. I do my private holistic healing and Akashic Record stuff, but I'm also a speech pathologist and I work in nursing homes, and that industry has come to a screeching halt. Not a lot of people are getting therapy in nursing homes right now because, we're trying to protect these patients that we have. And so I had the gift of time to be able to sit down and birth something new. And so we're able to see all the gifts amid all this chaos and fear. So it's just being able to see that, right? It's a matter of perspective sometimes, just to see where the gifts are.
And if you sit down and think about your life and all the quote unquote bad things that have happened, they've all led to something good.
Yes.
Anytime you go through a tough time, it's going to lead you to something good. Mm-hmm. And most people, when they think back of their lives, they wouldn't change a thing because even those supposedly bad things led you to grow into who you are right now.
Absolutely.
And who you were around. And, so an example from my own life, recently, my husband took my kids to Oklahoma for a couple weeks. We had a rental property there, and she lived there for 8 years and, of course, decided to move out during the pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your tenant.
Yeah, my tenant.
Yep.
And so my husband had to go to Oklahoma to fix up the house, and he took the kids, and I'm going to be honest with you that I was excited to get some time to myself, and all you moms out there.
No one's experienced that before. No.
I love my kids, of course, but all you moms out there know exactly what I'm talking about. But the only problem was that everything was shut down.
Right.
There were no, I couldn't say, hey, Irene, let's go to a restaurant and have a glass of wine. There was none of that.
Nope.
Everyone was pretty much quarantining.
Yep.
I was thinking, gosh, I'm stuck here. No restaurants, no bookstores, no coffee shops, no shopping.
Yep.
So I was forced. Well, not really forced. I chose to work on my spiritual growth. Mm-hmm. I chose to use that time to go within and figure out who I am. And plus, going through a time like this brings that kind of stuff into crystal clear focus.
Yes.
You literally could be facing death. Mm-hmm. And people around you could be facing death. Mm-hmm. And that's what we all thought at the beginning. It could have been anyone in our family. It could have been myself. And so I was thinking to myself, what am I going to do with this life? And how much time do I really have
Well,
left?
it's so funny because I was just going to say that when we face death, we also face life. That when we embrace death, we embrace life. And I never really understood that saying before, but I'm really starting to understand it. It's, when there's this part of us that, doesn't always, there's this fear about fulfilling your life's purpose and fulfilling the things that are your inner, guidance that are pulling you to. And I think that when you can look at death in the face and say, man, that could be me, there's something that happens within you that says, this makes me want to live my life to the fullest. It's kind of like you hear the stories about people who find out they're going to be dying in, a month or two. They have some terminal illness and they've just got these 1 or 2 months to live. Boy, do those people live their lives to the fullest. And what is the saying that live your life every day like you're dying, right? Yeah. And it's almost a contradiction, but it's so true. It's just, that's when we can really appreciate all we have in life and we can make the most of it. And I think that's what we've done. We've really been able to explore that and make it happen.
That's right. And through this process of connecting in with my spirit, and that's, during this time when my kids were gone, that's when our idea came about with starting the podcast. And, I had resistance to something like that in the past because of, some of my belief systems, the mystical, magical stuff. What, I would think, what would people think? But now I don't care.
Yeah, it's almost like I am who I am. If you like it, great. If you don't, then listen to somebody else.
Exactly. That's the way I feel now.
Yeah. And it's like, if I was dying tomorrow, heck yeah, I'd be doing this, Yeah. But I'm not dying tomorrow as far as I know. So, so one of the last techniques that we wanted to talk about was grounding. And this is another very, very important one because as I do Akashic Record readings for people, this is always showing up. I think it has shown up for every single reading, for every single one of my clients that I've done in the last few months. It's grounding. Can you talk a little bit about that, Heather?
I can, yes. And by grounding, we mean just taking your shoes off and putting your feet in the grass.
It's very simple. It's very concrete.
Simple. And it doesn't have to be for very long at all.
Yep.
And in the wintertime, when you don't feel like taking your shoes off, you just put your hands on a tree. It works the same way.
Oh, yeah.
And grounding, it sounds very airy-fairy, doesn't it?
It does, but it works.
But it's not. It's research-based.
Yes.
And here are all the things that they've found with earthing. It regulates your cortisol, your body's main stress. It neutralizes free radicals, which are highly reactive molecules that damage cells, reduces inflammation, reduces stress, improves sleep, reduces risk factors of cardiovascular disease, and reduces pain. And let me tell you a little bit of how it actually works.
Right.
So the Earth has an abundance of negatively charged electrons. And what happens in our bodies is we get a buildup of positive electrons in our body. And when we make contact with the Earth can absorb some of those positive electrons. And
it's actually a scientific thing. So it's not just, like you said, airy-fairy. And it's interesting because about a year or two ago, my daughter had a neuroma. It's this like neural condition that showed up on her foot. And she's always been a tippy-toe walker. Like ever since she was young, she just has this habit of walking on her tipping toes. And it's funny because she's not a very grounded person. She's always up in her head. And I think that, that is a manifestation of that tendency for her. And because I do this healing work, I did this healing session on her. And sure enough, what came up was that she was not grounding to the earth. And that's why this neuroma had been created, because there was not that ionic exchange happening between the ground and her feet in order to keep her balanced. And she tends to get over anxious, and it's because she's not releasing that anxiety into the earth. So basically what we're doing when we're earthing is we're releasing any of those excess energy that has pent up. So a lot of people experience that as anxiety, and there's a lot of anxiety in the world today. And isn't it a coincidence that during a time when we do have more anxiety, we're also not as connected to the earth. We're not doing as many things that are part of nature. Now, there are a lot of hikers out there and a lot of people that, do outdoor yoga and things like that. But in the general population, we're not spending as much time outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something to be said about doing that just for a few minutes each day. There's something just immensely therapeutic about nature.
It truly is. My 8-year-old and I went to a park the other day, and we sat down under a tree, a beautiful tree. It was a beautiful, gorgeous, sunshiny day, just a few clouds on the sky. And we sat down under this tree and lay down in the grass and just kind of watched the clouds go by. And when I asked myself in that moment, do I have a problem right now? The answer was definitely no. I mean, it was it really felt like this is heaven on earth right here. Just being present in this moment with my son, enjoying nature.
Yeah.
It really gets you out of your head.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, we hope that this content that we've covered today has really helped you all, will help you through this process. I know, we're all in this together and we're in some pretty chaotic, frightening times, but we will get through this. And hopefully these strategies and these words will help you to move through these times to stay in that center of the storm. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to talking with you again next week.